Hello and welcome to Dave Makes Stuff. For this video I figured I'd try to find out how far the suspension on our off-road Audi TT would flex. Now I could have cobbled something shonky together to do the job, but well, that's not how we do things around here. Wait, I think I have someone else's script. Anyway, so I picked up some steel beams I had lying around and started chopping them by way of creating a ramp I could use to lift one wheel until another just lost contact with the ground. It seemed sensible to go for a design that used the garage wall for stability. Not so much because the ramp collapsing would be a big deal in itself, more because the neighbour's fantastic lifted Mitsubishi Delica lives just the other side of the fence, and pole vaulting a TT into it would not be very neighbourly. The obvious downside is that attaching the ramp to the garage wall inevitably means that the ramp, well, ends in a wall. And this might or might not be a problem, depending on how far up the ramp we get. The angle of the ramp was set by highly scientific methods and was therefore too steep, but we won't find that out until later. The key thing is to weld stuff. In this case, plenty of stuff. You might ask, how did you know that the beams were strong enough? The answer would be that the beam strength is proportional to the width of the beam and to the cube of the depth, which, as I'm sure you can see, means that in this case they'll take a total mass of, hey look, it started raining and there were 7 fat pigeons bathing on the roof. Lost my train of thought there. Anyway, these beams are open section underneath, which isn't great for their strength. So I tied them together with some cross pieces that will also allow a mid-span support to go in without the beams just sort of splaying out like the pages of a book. I carefully calculated the diameter and wall thickness of the tube required for a support leg. If it's too long and slender, it will buckle at quite a low load. Now the force required for buckling, F, is equal to pi EI upon KL squared. So I used scaffolding bar, and it looked like this, and I welded it good. The last support it needs is of course a wall plate. This is partially to stop the whole thing seesawing about the centre support leg, which would not be ideal, but mostly it's there to stop ejecting the whole car sideways through the fence, which would make great video, but would otherwise not be ideal. This is supported by 4 bolts whose shear strength is proportional to their cross-sectional area and the strength of the steel, and therefore I had to use 4 big ones. And when it was done, I tested it. Now, obviously, a man and a car weigh about the same after 9 months of lockdown, so clearly if I can walk up it, it must be up to the job. So I sent the car up it. I could say I did it with boldness and panache and just nailed it in a great soaring arc of all-conquering off-road power. In fact, I just did, but it wouldn't be quite true. There's something quite unnerving about the nose of the car heading up a ramp which is A, invisible from the cabin, and B, rain slick. The TT and I went up the ramp fairly cautiously until the passenger front wheel started to spin, at which point it seemed to make sense to wait for dry weather. Yes, in the UK. Another minor issue was that some bozo had built the ramp facing the garage, and while it's normal to put a car in a garage, it is customary to open the door first. So to create a bit more room, I took the front bumper off. Subsequent testing had its share of hairy moments. Normally when you smack a car's radiator or sump, a little man with a spanner has to fix it. That little man being me, which focuses the mind somewhat. But when we did get a combination of dry weather and a halfway competent driver, the results looked like this. It's no trophy truck or live-axled rock crawler, but it's a reasonable start. When it does give up, part of the problem is that we're trying to climb quite a steep ramp, so there's enough resistance to spin the lightly loaded wheels sooner than there might be with a shallower gradient. And of course the other issue is we're using an Audi TT. So I pushed my luck a few more times with similar results, wheels spinning, and of course when the wheels spin it's quite happy to go sideways while you're about it. But then I experimented with making the ramp a bit shallower by wedging a big chunk of wood under the end to lift it and reduce the gradient, even if it did mess up all my careful calculations. But sometimes such sacrifices are required. As you can see, the TT was quite happy to hop up the step, and it did a better job of climbing the ramp too. At the time when I backed off, only the front passenger wheel was spinning, which suggests that the Haldex hadn't got the back axle involved yet, and it might have gone a little further, so there might be a bit more to be had. But before we start trying to improve its performance, there are other priorities to deal with. Despite appearances, this car wasn't actually intended to be an ornament for the drive, and it's been here quite long enough. Part of the reason for the long delay and the short video is that I've been getting on with the little jobs needed before it can have its MOT inspection and get back on the road. Jobs like fitting an anti-roll bar. I put a request out for an anti-roll bar, and within 24 hours Sean Thompson had driven 90 miles to drop one off for not much more than fuel money, which was awesome. Can't get far without a license plate either, but the challenge is to find somewhere to fit it without smashing it the first time we go off-road. So step 1 is, of course, to mount it on some galvanised steel by means of big reassuring bolts. That steel plate is then hung from the back of the car on some beefy hinges, and the idea is that it doesn't move in normal use but hinges out of the way when asked. And then there's a couple of LED lights to illuminate it at night. And then one last mod worth noting, I've stretched the rear anti-roll bar drop links to match the new ride height. Anti-roll bars are not helpful for suspension flex at all, but we have to have them to get through the MOT test. What we do when off-roading is another matter. So, things we've learnt in this video. We're nearly ready for the road. Nearly. I know we've been nearly ready for the road for a while, but we're nearly ready for the road. And TT's, well, their articulation's alright, but it could be better. I want it to be better. Need to find a way to stop that rear wheel spinning. I've got some ideas. How would you do it? Please give us your ideas in the comments, and also if you've enjoyed watching, please like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.